Who would you rather support? A small, democratic, pro-Western Israel, or the 72 times bigger theocratic authoritarian regime in Iran, who chants death to America and actively develops a nuclear bomb, pledging to drop them on their enemies? Well, it's a no-brainer for many, so they choose Iran. As in every other new conflict, everyone becomes an expert in a matter of 24 hours of watching TikToks. Or you might be even more advanced, so you pair it with 2 YouTube videos. Regardless, much of the new experts don't even have an idea that in fact Israel and Iran were allies for a long time. Before the Islamic Revolution took place in 1979, Iran was ruled by the Pahlavi dynasty, who was sympathetic to Israel and an ally to the US. I know, an Islamic state who didn't want to wipe out Israel before it became mainstream. Shocking. Actually, the Iranian state was quite pro-Western at the time, because the Shah was actively trying to westernize the country, often pushing it too hard, which angered a huge part of the people in Iran. To get an idea how Iran looked like before, you can take a look at this picture. You can see why a lot of fundamentalists and Sharia conservatives didn't like the Shah policies. By the 1978, the population of Iran started to really dislike the Shah. The left wing, the conservatives, they all believed that Reza Pahlavi was too heavily reliant on the US, which is not too far from the truth, to be fair. Besides, the economy was not doing well. The inflation was high, the economic growth stagnant. At this point, the Shah was actively taking lessons from the dictators from the Eastern Bloc on how to handle raging peasants. Only in this case, he thought he would be like Stalin, but in turn became Bashar Assad. In a year, he said ciao to his citizens and fled to the US. Now it was celebration time. The evil pro-Western dictator was ousted, so Iran was now ready to become sovereign. Alright, who am I kidding? The new government began brutal repressions against everyone who opposed them, took back all their women's rights, and ended up in a war with Iraq in a year. Did you think it could be any different in the Middle East, my dear friend? Almost immediately, all ties with Israel were cut, even though Jews were still trying to reclaim their cooperation, so they even supplied weapons to Iran during the war with Iraq. Guess where all the weapons ended up? Exactly. Iran gave it to Hezbollah to target Israel. In 2002, the world learned that Iran was enriching uranium at Natanz and Kashan. Iran realized they have messed up with their conspiracy, so a year later they have publicly declared they are halting their nuclear weapons program. Then, the world has believed Iran, and we have never ever returned to this question since. I have no reason not to trust an old religious guy in a turban claiming to want to destroy half of the world. Consequently, the whole world didn't believe this fairy tale and imposed sanctions on the Iranian regime. The US pushed Iran into the nuclear deal in 2015, but Trump withdrew from there 3 years later. As of May 2025, Iran had uranium enriched up to 60%, with cases of particles being enriched to even 80%. For the reference, 3.7% is needed for the civilian purposes, while 90% for creation of a nuclear bomb. Again, I personally trust this bearded Islamic fundamentalist that Iran is enriching uranium solely for the civilian purposes. Who wouldn't? Since April 2025, the Trump administration was negotiating with Ayatollah, and ultimately the talks failed in June. If truth to be told, Iran does not have any allies. It cooperates with some countries like China and Russia, but they are no allies. At the first sight of Israeli jets, Russia immediately left Iran to deal with this on their own. To deal with this problem, Iran started funding various terrorist organizations, essentially becoming their puppet master. Just like that, the Axis of Resistance was born, consisting of Hezbollah, PMU, Hamas, the Houthis, and Assad Syria. They became Iran's proxies, protecting Iran from both Israel and the US attacks. But as you might have guessed, something went wrong. This wrong was October the 7th, which in turn sparked a chain of events leading to the current day. First, Israel showed Gaza how did The Weeknd film his clip Blinding Lights. Somehow, it accidentally wiped out 99% of Hamas there. I don't know how. After that, Netanyahu played some Watch Dogs and decided to do it in real life in Lebanon. And on top of that, Zelensky's cosplayer exiled the British ice surgeon to Moscow. So what of Israel's strike on June 13th? Oh, but they attacked first, they are the aggressors. Hold on, What you have to understand is Middle East is not modern Western Europe. Here, the countries are ready to turn each other into ashes and always try to do so. Strong condemnations from the United Nations and calls for peace don't work. What works is the strong army, brilliant strategy, and boldness. If not for these three components, Israel would have never survived as a state. The 6 Days War is the best representation. Technically, Israel struck first the air force in Egypt. However, the Arab coalition were ready to strike Israel and were preparing for the war. It's the type of situation when you know you're about to get beaten on the street, and the only thing you can do is to strike first anyways. Today, Israel for sure could have waited until Iran finishes their nuclear bomb. But then, they would have to be facing much stronger and dangerous Iran. I remind you, the supreme leader of Iran is directly saying one of the goals of their nuclear program is to destroy the Jewish state. Israel decided not to face the same fate as Ukraine with getting all these words of condemnation. So they took action and struck Iran first. I know, aggressive Bibi, we have to stop him. I stand with the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are really winning in using the AI. So far, these are one of the greatest generated pics, hands down. In the meantime, because of Israel, the top Iranian military command positions are currently vacant. The problem for Israel became the Fordo nuclear site. It is placed deep in the mountains, even deeper than Khamenei now. To help with that, Bibi called his daddy Trump asking to do something about this. On the 21st, the US joined Israel attacking Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. The damage still remains unclear, with many media doubting its effectiveness. A lot of voices are now trying to compare the US involvement in Iran with the campaign in Iraq, which is absolutely funny and remind me comparing chicken ranch with a bush. To begin with, the Iranian nuclear threat is a real threat, which is confirmed by multiple parties, including IAEA, the main nuclear energy monitoring agency. I have said that before, and I will say this again to all the leftists supporting Iran. This is the man who will be having nuclear weapons if let alone. Are you sure you want to hand him such a weapon? Besides, the boots on the ground is probably the last thing the current US administration wants. At the moment, they are doing everything to pressure Iran into the signing of a deal on American terms. Boots on the ground is the last, most brutal and high-stakes option if nothing else works. The world is too unstable for the US to get involved in a local Middle East war. Couple of days later, Iran had to get more material for their new AI-generated content, so they struck the US base in Qatar. This, in turn, led to all the Middle East gathering around Qatar and condemning Iran. All the 12 missiles were intercepted and the other was led to fly into the sea. This attack is probably one of the most symbolic attacks ever. On 23rd of June, the peacemaker and the authors of a deal declared a ceasefire which was broken the following day by both sides. The Orange Man was really upset. It's like giving a candy to a child and then taking it a couple of minutes later. Traumatizing experience. As of now, the situation remains unclear, but that would be the end of the episode 3 of the World War III.